Sugihara's coordination with the acting Dutch consul, and see photos of the two men along with students of the Mir Yeshiva, the only Polish center of Jewish learning to survive the Holocaust in its entirety. It's an ordinary section of the exhibition that highlights Chiune Sugihara's bravery and his decisive response to the desperation of thousands. We're honored that tonight Nobuki Sugihara will be in conversation with Ann Curry. Ann Curry, I'm sure, needs no introduction. She's an award-winning journalist and photojournalist, a former NBC News network anchor and international correspondent, and the winner of 7 national news Emmys and numerous other awards, including a Medal of Valor from the Seaman Wiesenthal Center for her dedication to reporting about genocide. It is our great honor to have her with us tonight to celebrate the legacy of Nobuki's father and to learn more about this remarkable stand of conscience during one of the darkest chapters of human history. We're going to learn more from a brief video clip, and then Ann Curry and Nobuki Sugihara will take the stage. Thank you.
The diplomat sending the message is named Chiune Sempo Sugihara. Sugihara writes of his shock over what is happening to the Jews in Europe. At the end of the letter is a startling revelation. Sugihara says there are hundreds of Jewish refugees outside his consulate gates every day, begging for transit visas to flee the country. He asks permission to give them visas. But the foreign ministry does not agree. Sugihara asks at least 3 times, but his requests are denied. More and more refugees gather outside. Sugihara records his anguish in his diary.
There were women and old people and children. They all seemed exhausted. I didn't know whether they had any place to sleep. Maybe they slept in the train station or on the street. Each day the crowd grew bigger. With tears in their eyes, they asked for the Japanese visas.
But within the files, there is another document, a list. More than 2,000 names of desperate Jewish refugees who did receive visas from Sugihara. What happened to these people and to the diplomat who defied his government to try to save them? The story of Chiune Sugihara and the strange, almost unknown link between the Japanese and the Jewish people begins more than 100 years ago.
Nobuki Sugihara, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome. I know it has been somewhat overwhelming. You have said that the times that you have spent with survivors and their families before, maybe there were 30. And now, today, for the first time, you see so many, more than we understand, 170. And it has got to have been overwhelming today.
Yes, 170, I was told, they were the survivors' families with whom I met 30 minutes ago. Now here must be
Even
many
more.
more. Yeah. A few years ago, I was in Israel. I met survivors in Netanya. In Netanya, they made a street named Chiune Sugihara. And near Netanya, there is a small town. Many Sugihara survivors are living. But that time, it was 30 people. And here in New York, if I see 170 or even more, it's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable, and to know that your father, what you are doing is you are experiencing the legacy of your father's compassion. So this must, in you, bring a kind of feeling. What is that? Because that is something that all the rest of us can only look to you to understand.
There are many stories about my father in the book or movie or documentary in TV, but always it's half fiction, half real story. I want to keep the real story for the future generation who would study the history, what happened. And it's not only for me, it's for everybody who are involved and who would see the future.
All right, so you want to make sure that history records what he did correctly. So let's do that now.
Okay.
Let us talk about, as we just heard from the tape, that your father, Chiune Sugihara, was a diplomat representing the Japanese government in Kaunas, Lithuania in the summer of 1940. Correct me if I say anything incorrect, right? Poland had already been invaded, Western Europe was already occupied, and the way out seemed for the Jewish people who were fleeing for their lives east through Russia towards Japan. Your family was preparing to leave Kaunas, Lithuania, because all the foreign diplomats had been ordered out because the Soviet Union had just annexed Lithuania. And so the diplomats started leaving. But your father did not leave with the other diplomats because something was happening outside the consulate. What did your father tell you about, how did he describe to you what he was seeing?
My father didn't tell me until I was 19 years old. My mother, I don't know, they just said that they issued many visas to Polish people. That's why he was fired. But why? You know, I didn't ask more than that. And one day in 1968, July, my father came back from Moscow because he was working in Moscow from 1960 until 68 and the further on. One Israeli diplomat, commercial attaché, Mr. Nishri, he called my home and asked for my father. And my father was on holiday in Japan for 2 weeks, and he said he wanted to see my father. So my father took me to the Embassy of Israel in Tokyo, and we found out that Mr. Nishri was one of the survivors from the visa my father issued. Since then, I started knowing the story.
Your mother describes in a quote on camera, seeing the people outside. And she describes hundreds of refugees, many, as you say, who had escaped Poland into Lithuania. They were standing with their children, she said, from morning to night, and then back the next day, morning to night, pleading for visas. And this quote really captures, I think, the struggle inside the consulate, as he was trying to figure out what to do to get the Japanese government to allow the visas. Quote, "My husband sent another telegram for the third time. The answer was the same answer. No matter how many telegrams, do not issue visas. We did not know what to do. We could not sleep at night. We kept thinking and thinking what to do. In addition to that, I had a baby. We had 3 young children. If my husband issues the visas contrary to the Foreign Office instructions, then when we return to Japan, my husband would for sure lose his job. We were thinking and thinking what to do, and the representatives of the refugees begged and begged us, please give us the visas. Do you, first of all, know why the Foreign Office, why Japan kept saying no? Did he understand why?
No, they didn't say don't issue visa, but they put condition in instruction that it's almost impossible. The condition is that you have to have enough cash, which is like $5,000 for today, and a ticket to cross Siberia and reach Japan. No, before that, reach Vladivostok, which is a port of Japan Sea, and travel to Japan by ship. So all the cost, plus staying in Japan for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you have to have like $10,000. Almost nobody had. So these conditions they put to my father, and he thought, oh, nobody would afford that. So he was still sending, I think he sent 3 times request, but always these conditions, you have to keep the condition. Then you may issue. They say you may issue, so they didn't refuse. And my father knew always the answer. Of course, they will not allow me to issue. So he delayed date of telegram always. And from August, I think beginning of August till end of August, he didn't send telegram.
To Japan.
To
He did
Japan,
not.
he ignored.
He ignored them. And all the other diplomats left, but he did request to the Soviet Union that he could stay, correct?
He requested, he negotiated Soviet authority in Kaunas to let the Jews go over the border, to pass the border to Soviet Union and travel all the way to Moscow, and Moscow to Vladivostok in Siberia. And the Soviet Union, they agreed after my father's negotiations, and it's around 25th of July. The top 10 of Russian government, Soviet government agreed and signed. Stalin and Biera and all the top signed. And then my father started issuing visa.
So rather than leave with all the foreign other people, he stayed, got this agreement from the Soviet Union's officials there, and then started writing visas like this one.
Yes. This is 5th of August. It's already stamped. It's made stamp. It's not handwriting, but in the beginning was handwriting everything. So 100 people a day was very difficult.
And according to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, he granted transit visas to 2,140 individuals, which also protected an estimated 300 others, most of them children, because they were essentially family visas. You just talked about some of them were handwritten, and some of them were stamped. But this is a lot of visas, 2,140. How was that possible to process that number in so short of time, knowing that he still had to leave by the end of August?
How possible? But
What did he
day and
do?
night
How did he do it?
Well, he had assistants, Polish assistant, and even German. They were all spies from Poland and from Nazi, but they cooperated.
They cooperated.
Yes.
And so are you saying that he stayed in his office doing them for hours? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think he stayed till late evening.
So how many hours a day would he work signing these visas?
I think 18 hours
A day.
a day.
Handwriting?
Handwriting and the registering, because he made a list. Number, name, family name, private name, and from which town you come from.
And did the people come in from outside who were waiting outside? They just came in one by, did he sit with them? Or did he just do this by getting a list of names?
No, he spoke to each person. He sat down with each person and he listened to each person's story, where he comes from, why you want to go to Japan, I mean, as a transit. Because he respected every person. He wanted here by himself in order to issue transit visa. Actually, it's his responsibility.
So for 18 hours he would do this, and he processed all of these things. And he did this all the way through the time he had to leave, which was August 30th, is that correct?
Yes, August 30. Yeah.
And were there others in the Japanese government who also knew, or did he do, you mentioned the Polish person and the German person who helped him, but were there people in the Japanese government who understood what he was doing, being the water between the rocks that were stopping him, or was he acting alone?
Same moment in Japan, they would know what my father was issuing, how many people are waiting. He delayed his telegram to 5th of September. So during 1 month, he didn't send
Any communications?
any communication.
Back to Japan.
And the 5th of September, he was still asking if he may issue visa.
So wait a minute, he was issuing visas and still asking for permission at the same time?
Yeah. He knew the answers.
What an act of disobedience.
Yes. Right.
And to risk not just what that would mean in terms of the cost he would have to pay, but also, if I may say, my mother was Japanese, and in all cultures there is the problem of being ashamed for for not doing what everybody wants you to do. But I can tell you that in the Japanese culture there's a very heavy burden of disgrace. It's very heavy. Mm-hmm. So he was risking disgrace, a cultural disgrace, by doing this. So the question is why? Why does a human being risk so much?
I asked once my father, why did you issue visa? It was a long time after. I received a scholarship from Israeli University in Jerusalem, so I could go to study in Hebrew University in 1968. And my father came to visit me in 1969. Then I asked my father, why did you decide to issue visa? I thought he would say something great, but he said, just I pity them. I know the situation, how dangerous it was in Europe, but he hoped 2 or 3 people would succeed to go through these dark days.
Terrible
terrible
journey.
days. He never thought, like now, 100 people, 200 people would make it. But surprisingly, it's 10,000, and some people say 250,000 descendants in the States and in Israel, Australia, South Africa, all together.
But this actually, to me, says something more. If he thinks only a few might survive, that a few might be able to get through, then he was risking a lot for a few. He was risking a lot for a few, which meant that he valued that. He valued the few. As many as he could, but he valued the few. So the question everyone wants to understand is what causes some people to risk for the one, for the few, for as many as possible, and what causes other people not to do it. And I know you said that he has compassion and that he was thinking, that he was feeling pity, he was feeling sorry for the people who are outside. Was there something in his childhood, in his experience, that taught him compassion, that made his own suffering or witnessing the suffering of others before this happened, that allowed him to feel so deeply?
It might be that his younger age, he was sent to Manchu. Town is called Harbin. He received scholarship from Ministry of Foreign Affairs to study foreign language, and he was given to study Russian. And where to study Russian that time was Harbin. Harbin was in China, on the border of Soviet Union, and many Russians, white Russians especially, were living in Harbin, so he could study in Harbin. After 1-2 years, he was accepted by the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a secretary in consulate. And he also went to military service for 2 years in Harbin, in Manchu. Harbin is in Manchu. Manchu was established by Japanese government that time, under control of Japanese government. And after 16 years, he left suddenly Manchu because he saw that Japanese soldiers were too arrogant and he couldn't look at them, their behavior. He was against militarism. So maybe this made him to decide to save some people.
So are you saying that his experiences when he was younger in other cultures, including experiencing people who were Russian, helped him, and Chinese, helped him understand the truth that most people are still struggling with, if I may interject that, which is that the other is us, that we are connected. Are you saying, is that what you're saying?
No,
Tell me what you're saying.
he couldn't stand to see Japanese soldiers
Yes. Oh, I see.
treating Chinese people.
So he witnessed, you're saying,
He
Japanese
witnessed.
soldiers being cruel?
Cruel.
Cruel. He witnessed that cruelty and he felt empathy.
Yes.
I see. So was there, I know some people have said because he became a Christian that this may have had some influence.
Oh.
But was there something, I know that you have said that it wasn't about his faith, it was about his humanity. It's about being a human being and wanting to feel for another human being. But what I wonder is, did his mother, his parenting, the reason I keep asking this is this. Scientists tell us that compassion is a muscle, that when we practice it, we become very strong. We don't practice it, it's easy to be weak and not do the right thing. I'm just trying to see, is there anything else, the way he was raised, his parents, anything else that you can say that allowed him to feel pity?
This I don't know. My father loved his mother very much, but he lost his mother while he was in Harbin when he was 20 years old. And I don't know how the education she gave, but I think there was some impact from my grandmother. And about Christian, he was not Christian, and we are not Christian. Nobody's Christian in our family. But my father got married to a Russian lady in Harbin, and she was Orthodox Christian. In order to get recognition of marriage, you have to go to church. So my father went with a Russian lady, her name is Claudia, to a church, a Russian Orthodox church in Harbin. And for one day, he became Christian.
He checked it out.
And my mother, here,
She's on the left there, yeah?
yeah, too. Few years back, they were stationed in Helsinki, and all the diplomats' wives meet in a party, and everybody says, I'm Christian, I'm Christian. My mother, yeah, I'm Buddhist, I cannot say that. So she asked my father to take the church, Christian church in Helsinki, and baptize. Just in a second you can baptize in Christian church, just to get the small cookie and put it in the mouth. So she could say, I'm also Christian.
From your mother's testimony, it sounds like she may have had some influence on the decision. Do you, what credit do you think your mother should get for supporting or helping your father make the decision to risk so much for the people who were suffering and who were doomed to die if they weren't saved?
Yeah. I asked also my mother if she knew those days what you had to do. Did you support, did you help to decide my father? She said, no, she didn't know much, but at least she gave a massage to my father.
For the stress he was under. That's good.
Good.
Massages
least.
can help, I'll tell you. You know, it's sobering, very, very sobering to recognize, and it must be said here, that it is estimated that after Nazi Germany invaded Lithuania, 90% of the Jewish people who remained there were murdered. And we should also mention, with significant help from the local population of Lithuanian people. I wonder, knowing, really having a good sense about how difficult it was, when he was on the train leaving on the 30th, and I assume of August.
It was, I think, 2nd or 5th of September.
So he overstayed, or at
He
least
stayed. He left the consulate. He closed the consulate and left.
He
and
left.
Stayed in Hotel Metropole in Kaunas.
I see. And so staying later so he could issue the visas, having to go, finally getting on the train. I think sometimes as I've been researching this, how heavy his heart must have been, knowing that he was leaving people he couldn't help, not knowing if the people who he'd done all this, spent 18 hours, you said, a day signing the visa, how many would survive, and also knowing that he was going to pay a price. Did he ever talk about that?
There is a tape. He was speaking about it. He said in the hotel, maybe he issued 5 visas, and at the railway station when they were leaving, 3. So it was not such a crowd already. Most of the people who wished to have visa received.
The ones who came to his consulate office, those are the ones who received it,
Yes.
right?
It's not like a movie, the people are waiting for visa and my father threw a stamp. It's not true. My father would never throw a stamp. He's responsible for his job. So it's another story made for movies.
Right, it's good for movies, but the truth is, you're saying that you believe, based on what your father has told you, that he signed all the visas for the 2,140, that was the group that waited outside who came to him.
Yes.
So you're saying that he said that he signed all the ones that came to
Yeah.
him.
But I know there were some more, hundreds people after my father left made a visa. There were fake visas, fake stamps. Some people were selling even the stamp and issuing.
Sure, because they had the template, they had what worked, so they just had to copy it.
You can copy. But if I see the visa, which is fake or real, I can recognize because I know how my father would sign. This one visa, it was a stamp. Even my father's signature was stamp. But you see the red stamp, it's on, my father's name is 4 characters there. My father stamp on his name, and in fake stamp, fake visa, this red is somewhere else.
I see. So so you can tell the difference between a
Yes.
fake one. And do you know how many fake ones were made? Any idea?
I don't know, maybe 700 people say, but
A
not
large,
sure.
there's some discussion about as many as 700, which is significant. Did he, sometimes people, even people who help, even people who make the decision to do the right, empathetic, compassionate thing, suffer sometimes guilt that they couldn't do more. Did your father?
If he suffered, you mean? I don't think he suffered so much. Of course, he thought maybe he could save if he stays for another 6 months. But this was an order, and he got permission till the end of August to stay in Kaunas. He couldn't. This I don't know. He never told me. But I think he did what he could. And after Kaunas, he traveled to Berlin, and then from Berlin he was sent to Prague in Czechoslovakia.
And then to Bucharest, Romania.
No, not
No?
yet. In Prague, he issued another 80 visas to
In Prague, he
Jewish
issued another
refugees.
80 visas. Did he have permission for that?
excuse me.
Did he get permission first, or he just did it?
No,
No permission.
I think he informed in 6 months, after 4 months to the government.
I see. So he told them after he did it.
Yes.
And then, so he did not go to Bucharest, Romania. He did not do that.
After Prague, he stayed in Prague to establish Japanese consulate. Then he was sent to Königsberg. Königsberg is Stalingrad. It was a German navy port, very important for Germans to attack Soviet Union. So he was doing an intelligence job. When Germans are going to attack Soviet Union, because Japanese had a promise to German that if Germans go into Soviet Union, Japan will attack from Siberia. So they wanted to know the timing.
I see. So they were asking him to keep an eye on things.
And,
But my understanding is he was arrested at some point with the family, and that he was held with the family until 1947. Is that correct?
Yeah, when the Russian came into Bucharest.
I see. So he was in Bucharest, and that's where he was arrested. I see.
6 months he stayed in Kaliningrad, or Königsberg it's called.
I see.
He was again persona non grata there. And
Persona non grata.
Yes,
Who called him persona non grata?
Germans.
The Germans called him persona non grata, which meant what?
Not wanted person. They say he was bothering Germans, but Germans and Japanese, they were allied.
They were allies.
He knew something about German that time. So they wanted kick him out, not to get more information. Then he was sent to Bucharest.
And so my understanding is that he was finally able to return home to Japan in 1947.
Yes, the war finished in 1945, and he was in the camp. He and his family were kept in camp, and 2 years later, they could go home.
And did he face consequences? You said that he did. Tell us about that when he got home.
He got home, and 2 weeks later, he went to the office, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and his superior told him, there is no place for you anymore.
The superior told him that.
Yeah.
There's no place for you.
Can you please write, how do you say,
A letter of resignation?
letter of resignation? He said, okay. He even didn't ask reason. If they say, you're fired, so what can he do?
So how did your father support his family after the war, after losing his job as a diplomat?
Yeah, that was the difficult years. He worked in a port, carrying heavy things, and for a while.
He worked in a port, so he was working, unloading ships?
Unloading or loading ships
I see.
in Yokohama port. He was a strong man.
Yeah, he was a strong man, obviously, in many ways. Were there other jobs that he did, or was that his job?
He did. He tried many jobs here. He rented a small shop, and he tried to sell electric valves or
A little bit light bulbs?
yeah, light valves, because that time light valve didn't. How do you say?
They didn't last long?
Didn't last.
I see.
Maybe 10 days, 15 days.
Oh, so you could sell a lot of bulbs. So that was a good idea, selling light bulbs.
He was not a salesman.
So it was not a big success.
No.
Then. So he basically worked in these jobs, sort of menial jobs,
he worked
struggling.
also in NHK.
He worked at NHK, which is the National Broadcasting
National
Company.
Broadcasting Company, because he could speak Russian. He could work in Russian department to send to Russia news from Japan.
I see.
Maybe
So-
it was propaganda, but
Oh, well. And in all those years, did anyone in Japan know, did very many people know, did the Japanese people know what he had done?
no, nobody. Until 1968.
Until 1968, when someone who did not forget,
Yeah, Mr. Nishiri, who came to the embassy
survivor.
of Israel.
he went to
Next
the
day, it was in Asahi Shimbun, Asahi newspaper. A short story about,
in Japan.
my father issuing visa, and one survivor found him. That was all. One more thing, that my father requested son to have a scholarship somewhere outside, and Israel arranged a scholarship for me. So
You're the son
I'm the son.
who got the scholarship. So, do you remember, you were old enough then to know, what was your father's reaction upon learning that a survivor remembered him and that there was an opportunity as a result for his son to be educated in Israel?
Well, he was cool.
He was
Okay.
cool? He was cool, so he didn't jump up and down.
No,
but-
he didn't know that so many survivors could survive. I mean, so many people could survive. Mr. Nishiri didn't say. Maybe he said, yes, Dr. Varhaftik, he was the Minister of Religions. He survived. He was one of negotiator to my father in Kaunas. So he survived. And deputy of Tel Aviv city he survived. So 2 or 3 names Mr. Nishiri told my father. So he thought, okay, so maybe 2 or 3 survived.
So at what point did he understand the weight, how wide of an impact he had on humanity?
In 1985, one Japanese came to Israel and he collected money from Japanese politicians and business people to plant trees near Jerusalem. The town is called Beit Shemesh. And they received a piece of land to plant. So Japanese sent money. I mean, he brought money to buy the trees. And that time, I attended a ceremony. And I met about 20 survivors' family. So this was already a surprise. 20 people survived. One of the survivors, it was a lady, and she said she was young in Kaunas that time. She came with her mother to consulate, and there were 100 people waiting. And my father came out and said, ladies and children, you don't have to wait. Just leave your passport. Visa will be ready tomorrow morning to be picked up. So she said, my father was very gentleman. So I understood that it was my father. His character. He respect ladies.
And children, so he was gracious. So I understand that in 1984, if this is correct, Yad Vashem
Yad Vashem gave
named him among the righteous among nations.
yes.
Do you recall what that meant for him to be honored in this way? So many years. This is more than 40 years, 45 years after.
It didn't mean much for him.
Why?
Okay, if you want to give something, he didn't care to have medal. Every year or 2, while he was diplomat, he was getting medal. You know,
Yeah.
Everybody who works in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs get the medal. So he thought, okay, one more. No, it's not a heavy thing for him.
So you now have met, you said more than 170 people here. You've heard, as you've said earlier, I mean, there was one estimate of 40,000, someone was talking about 6,000. There are a lot of numbers flying around. But you were saying that, you know, when you think about 2,140 and you think about how many people, how many generations may come, that even you don't know, but as many as you said earlier, 200,000. I mean, when you think about that, your father did he understand ever how many people might have lived because of his actions? And when you think about how many people have lived because of his actions, I mean, you can't be too cool about it.
I'm sure he knows now. Wherever I go, he's just above me, and he's watching.
So he's watching right now.
Yes.
Well, that's a good thing, and I think maybe since we're going to say he's watching right now, let's think about what his essential message is. I cannot allow these people to die. People would come to me for help with death staring them in the eyes. Whatever punishment may be imposed on me, I know I should follow my conscience. Did he ever regret his decision?
I don't think so.
Even despite the menial jobs and the light bulbs and the difficulty paying the bills and what it cost him. I mean, he went to school to be a diplomat. It was what he wanted to be. And this is what happened to him because of a decision he made.
He liked to work every day hard. He didn't mind any effort. You know, he does it. No time to think. No time to think back. Not to regret. he goes further.
What do you think he would want us to think now of what he did?
I think peace in the world and not to hate people. Respect every person, no matter which religion, which nationality, which race. There is no difference.
He lived to be 86 years old,
Yes,
and he lives on in you and above you and in all of the survivors
yeah.
and their families who will go on because of him. And I understand that there are some people who may want to ask you some questions directly who are among those groups. I don't know if before I open that up, let me just ask if Julie is here today. Is Julie in the room?
No,
No, okay. So we were hoping to meet Julie. Is there a survivor or a member of the survivor's family who would like to say something to Mr. Sugihara?
13 years old, standing in line at the consulate.
I'm sorry, a microphone is coming to you, and he just said he was 13 years old standing in line at the consulate. Sir, wait for a second. She's going to give you a microphone. There you
Thank
go.
you.
Can you help him with that? Great.
I just want to express my gratitude. I wouldn't be here. My family wouldn't be here. And if you count survivors, there are 14 members of my extended family who traveled to Moscow, Vladivostok, Tsuruga, and Kobe. So my deep thanks, and I'm delighted to be here and to express that gratitude. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And as a young boy, he wasn't able to say that, and now finally he can say that to your family, and that is a great. Who else would
great.
like to say something to Mr. Sugihara in this room? Yes, go ahead. There's a person here who's raised her hand, and could you please just give us your name?
Yes, my name is Esther Malka-Levertov. My father was a survivor. He was from Poland, then from there to Kobe, Japan, then from Shanghai, then San Francisco, New York, and settled in Montreal, Canada. We are 5 children, and Kananaher from today on, we're over 200 descendants. So if you think, if your father thought that there'd only be a few, this is one family, extended family. And I knew my father spoke about your father and about the visa that he got. And he always spoke about, how can I thank this man? I hope I will see him in my lifetime. So I'm taking this opportunity on behalf of the Bornstein family, Joseph Bornstein, to say thank you for making our family exist and to continue to exist. May God protect you and watch you.
All right, the floodgates are open. Yes, sir. There's a gentleman here. Thank you very much. Wait for the microphone. Could you please give us your name and say whatever you'd like?
Swislaki.
Mr.
I
Sutlaki.
lived with my family in Vilnius at the time, and my father used to go regularly to Kovno, to Kaunas, to get the visas. And one day he came back and he said, "I got it!" And here I am.
And here you are. There's a person with a hand up there, too. There's a gentleman here, and the microphone is going to you. Yes, sir. What is your name?
My name is Moshe Mlatek, and my father received a visa from your father, and again, on behalf of our family, thank you. So I travel extensively to Japan, and 20 years ago, no one knew the name Shuni Sugihara, and today he's a hero in Japan, as he should be. And so I want to thank the Japanese government for recognizing the issue and the mistake that they did, and now treat him like a hero. I'd love to know your thoughts about how he's viewed today in Japan.
That's a very good question. First of all, we're going to clap for your family. Mr. Nobuki, he's asking, of course, your thoughts about the change that people now know your father's story and understand that he is a hero in terms of the risks he took and the courage he had. What is your reaction to his question?
Yeah, because he became famous from the movies and some books. But many of Japanese people don't realize the fact. In the movie, 50% is fiction. It's more melodrama. They want you to cry. But my father's life, if you know, it's more than the film. You would cry more.
You don't have to augment what's true about this story.
Yeah.
It's enough. But did he live to be famous? Was he famous in his own lifetime?
No, not at all.
So when he died in 1986, did he know that he was famous? Did he know that he would be?
Only the time when I wrote my father a letter about Yad Vashem, when they were planting and the people came to appreciate, then he was very happy to know about it. But some people could go through and they reached Israel. He never thought about huge American nationalities, that you are so many. Maybe survivors of my father's visa are more in the States than Israel.
So if he's watching now, he knows finally.
Yes, he knows.
Yes, there are two people. Can you see them over there? There's a gentleman there with his hands up. There are three people, and there's a woman here we'll get to.
My name is Nathan Lewin, Lewin. I was born in Lodz. I was 4 years old when my mother and her brother came to your father in Kaunas after they had gotten the written authorization from Jan Zwartendijk, and your father issued the handwritten visa, which I still have to this day, which enabled us to leave from Vilna, go to Moscow, which you say the Soviet government authorized the day before our visa was issued. It was issued on the 26th of July. We went to Moscow, and as a boy of 4 years old, I took 2 weeks on the Trans-Siberian Railroad. Don't remember a second of that trip. And we made it to Kobe, and from Kobe to the United States in 1941. I have had the very good fortune of being a lawyer in the United States, arguing 28 cases in the Supreme Court of the United States.
My goodness.
And all this has been possible, and the lives of our children and our grandchildren have been possible because of your father.
I know your visa was number 17.
Yes, yes.
It's a very
it was.
rare visa, still you can find. It's all written by hand, by my father. You should keep this and give to your children, grandchildren. Now the value is $20,000.
We're not about to sell it, don't worry. But it was a visa that was issued, both one to my parents and myself, one to my grandmother, my mother's mother, who was Dutch, listed Netherlands, and one to my uncle, who subsequently died in the service of the Dutch government in Java, in the Dutch East Indies, which is where my mother initially thought it might be possible to go until she was told no visas to the Dutch East Indies, but you don't need a visa to go to Suriname or Curacao, to the Dutch West Indies. And because that was the opening, that was the possibility, therefore, Jan Zwartendijk wrote his statement on this document saying no visa is needed for Suriname or Curacao, and your father saw that as the opportunity to be able to save thousands of Jews.
That's right. I'd like to, there's a woman here who has had her hand out. Yeah, that's you. Who's had her hand up for a while. Let's give her a chance. Could you give us your name, please?
My name is Naomi Siegel-Dietz, and your father wrote visas for both my mother and my father and my grandfather. My parents were not a couple at the time. They were just scared kids from Warsaw. So I have been to your old house in Kaunas, and I saw on the walls the story of the other diplomats with whom he worked for these visas. I guess part of the story is what you were just talking about with Suriname. And how did he manage these deals with the other diplomats who were giving Jews visas to be able to leave Japan? Because didn't you need to have a visa to leave if you got off in Kobe? Or have I got that mixed up, that story?
She's asking, you understand the question, right? She's asking, once the visa, they had the visa and they were able to get through Russia to Japan, how were they able to get out of Japan to go where they needed to go? Was there, and really I think what you're asking is,
How
that's
did
what
they
she's
work together
asking,
if they'd
is
all
was
left?
there a collusion? Were there people, a collusion? Were there people in Japan who were trying to help the situation? Were there others who helped?
Japanese were, first of all, transit visa was valid for 10 days only. 10 days, if you don't have the relative in America or somewhere next country, you cannot go. So they had to extend this visa to stay in Japan. So some people helped Jewish people to stay longer, 1 month. Longest I know is 1 year. So they could stay in Japan. But when the Pearl Harbor starts, or before Pearl Harbor was starting, Japan tried to take them out. That's why they had to go to Shanghai. Shanghai was under Japan, Japanese government. So they were moved to Shanghai. And everybody from your father or grandfather tried to go anywhere else.
It wasn't Shanghai. It was a port that you didn't need.
They didn't need visa. No.
Right, that's one reason.
Yeah, especially
And also Japan
part
had
of
occupied it.
Yeah, Japan, they could move. They had to move. Japan didn't want to keep because they were going to the war with the
So it was when
United
the war was
States.
coming. Did that answer your question, sir, about the other consulates? No. Why don't you ask it? Pose the question.
What made some people go to one consulate and others go to another, or was there any activity among? Was there any coordinated activity among the consuls? I don't think so, but I guess we're asking if you know of the activity that was performed by the other consul representatives from other countries.
The other
Yes.
countries?
You mean Kaunas?
Yeah, in Kaunas. I think he's talking about whether in Kaunas there were other countries' consulates, diplomats, who are also working together to do this, or were they working independently?
They were rushing out. They had to close the consulate in the end of July
1940, right.
1940. Only my father requested to prolong the stay for 1 month. I think he calculated how many Jewish people are coming, maybe 2,000 or 1,000 for this. He would need 30 days. So he stayed, but he's a very strong negotiator, so he could succeed
But did
have.
he work with any of the other countries and the other consuls who did sign visas as well?
No,
They
everybody
were
left.
independent.
Just Dutch honorary consul, Jan Zwartendijk.
That's right.
He wrote some text that you don't need an entry visa to Curacao, but it's not a visa. But my father didn't meet Mr. Zwartendijk. They didn't cooperate. My father never talked to him by phone, as it says in the book. My father even didn't know him.
Wow, so it sounds like one influenced another without even meeting or discussing it with them because people were trying to find a way. People were trying to find a way to help. There's a hand up over here. I don't know if there's a microphone. Yes, it's coming to you. A gentleman has got his hand up. Yes, sir. What is your name and what would you like to say?
Hi. My name is Zalman Pertinsky. My father is from a town called Shtetl Druya, and his whole entire family was killed. And he survived during the wartime. He was in Vilna. He joined the Mir Yeshiva. So he was one of the hundreds that your father so amazingly got the visa for. So he now, my family is very appreciative, of course, and we have about 400 members of our family. He himself I'm one of 9 siblings. Each one of us has large families. Altogether, I would say probably around few hundred people that survived because of your father. Thank you very
Wow,
much.
Just one family. It's going to be hard.
One word. I was, my wife and I were in Belarus 2 weeks ago. We went to visit Yeshivat Mir, the building. Now it's a post office. But they made a ceremony to put plate for my father to, how do you say?
Honor him.
Honor him. It was 2 weeks ago. I saw the Mir. And I saw also the synagogue from that time.
I want to make sure that people who want to say something, you have a right to say. So let's bring a microphone. There's a gentleman. Yes, a woman. Yes, whoever you find. Yep.
Hi, my name is Chaya Chanowitz-Cole, Chanovich. My father was with the group that came from the Chabad group. They called them Lubavitch in those days. There are many children and grandchildren. Some of my other relatives are here in the room. One of the things, though, I do want you to understand is I've been working here with the museum and put together heritage testimony talking about my father's story, and of course your father having given a visa plays into that and is a big part of the story. And when I tell the story, I've had an opportunity to present it to some students in schools, and they have not heard the story. They've heard about some of the other righteous among the nations, but they don't know about Sugihara. And I'm very happy to be able to share that, and I'm hoping that all of us here in this room will tell the story because we are so grateful, not only to your father, but to your whole family, because you all in some way paid for us to be able to be here and to have the wonderful life that we have. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Those of you with microphones, you know what to do.
Who I am is insignificant. My wife, on the other hand, was a child and born in Shanghai. As they were leaving, her parents were Rabbi and Mrs. Jacob Nyman, and they survived in Shanghai, flourished in Shanghai, learned with the Mir Yeshiva diligently for many years, came to America, established yeshivas, shuls, and Talmidim Harbe, and have a whole family, a beautiful family. And on behalf of my wife, I'd like to thank everybody. And the Sugihara family. You had, 26 years ago, we attended in Town Hall. Your mother was there at the time. I think you might have been, some of the kids were there, I don't recall, but your mother for sure was there in town hall. But it shows you the importance. Many people here don't realize that 26 years ago there was an honorary celebration for your father. This shows you have to, every 20 years you really have to repeat these things. Because people forget, just like B'chol Dor V'dor, the same thing, you have to say it again and again and again. You have to be a makir tov constantly, day in and day out, so people don't forget and people learn and pick up that compassion and empathy and honor that you and your father possessed, and I'm sure you possess, and the many righteous do possess. So we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for all that you've done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Mr. Sugihara, I have a question for you. There was a survivor from Lithuania by the name of Sali Ganor, and he wrote a book about his experience growing up. The name of the book is Light One Candle. And he was 12 years old at the time, but he met your father, and he said your father was very gracious to him, and he thanked your father for doing the best he could. I'm just wondering, have you met with Sali Ganor, or do you know who he is? Sali Ganor.
Do you know who Sali Ganor?
I know Soli Ganor. My father never met him.
He's still alive. He's 92 and
Yes, he
living
lost
in
his
Israel.
wife a few days ago.
What?
He lost his wife a few days ago, Nobuki just said. So apparently you're still in contact with him. So.
Yes, but his story is not true. I know he came to Japan in 1990 for another event. He was saved near Auschwitz by American-Japanese soldier.
Right, the 442nd.
When the war
right.
finished.
Was it near Auschwitz? They were in Dachau. You're talking about the 442nd.
And he heard the story of Sugihara, and he was from Kaunas, really. So he made up his story after 1990. He was not that boy who invited my family to Pesach dinner, as he writes in the book. So I'm sorry about it.
I appreciate your adherence to making sure that the truth is spoken about. I appreciate that. As a journalist, I love that. Who else? I see a hand back there, I see a hand here, and I see a hand over there. We were going to start there because the microphone got there first, but there is one down here if someone has a microphone.
Thank you.
Yes, yes, sir. What's your name, sir?
My name is Phil Rosen, and I have two claims to fame. Number one is that my father and my uncle were saved by Sugihara. Number two is that for the last 6 or 7 years, I've been a good friend of Buki Sugihara, who I met, I think, 7 years ago. And the two of us went together to Netanya, where they established a park, beautiful park, in memory of Chiune Sugihara. And as I've told you in the past, I have an entire section in my library and a big picture like that one over there devoted to Mr. Sugihara. And thank you.
We have, there's a hand down here that's been up for a while. I think we should get a microphone to her, and there are a couple of others I've been seeing.
Thank
Yes,
you
ma'am.
so
What's
much.
your name?
Emily
Hello,
Schertz
Emily.
Passow. I am extraordinarily honored and grateful to be here. I'm very curious if you're willing to share with us how the knowledge of your father's activities have influenced your own life and your own parenting.
Good question.
I received scholarship to study in Hebrew University, and I studied there for a few years. After that, I started working in the Israeli company in diamonds. I continued.
How is your Hebrew, she's asking?
אפשר לדבר בעברית? אז המשכתי לעבוד בחברה ישראלית ביהלומים, איזה 13 שנה. לא כל הזמן גרתי בארץ, אבל גרתי בארץ גם ביפן, באירופה, ואחרי 13 שנה החלטתי להיות עצמאי. אז עברתי לבלגיה, אנטוורפ, זה גם מרכז של יהלומים. אז עד עכשיו הכל בסדר, יש לי 4 בנות ו5 נכדים, 5.
I know we're starting to run out of time, and I want to give people a chance, so maybe we could do a few more, if we could maybe limit our conversation a little bit so that we can get more people in. There's a gentleman here in a pink shirt, right there, and I see someone over here as well, a woman here.
Thanks.
Let's start with you.
Yeah, Chaim Cohn. I'm here with a larger contingency of the Brisky family. My grandfather survived and had 11 children, and I think we're up to a few hundred grandchildren and great-grandchildren. But I had a question. I was here at the museum 2 weeks ago for the Auschwitz exhibit, and one thing that struck me is what always strikes me is there's thousands of books about Hitler and thousands of books about Nazis, but very few about just the average people that quickly demoralized into
barbarism.
And there's not many books about that, and there's not that many books about people like your father. But really, that's the story, right? That there's more to be learned from, because your average Joe is not becoming a Nazi, but your average Joe could do something great or just turn away. So my question is, do you have maybe insight or thoughts on how to communicate that kind of message to younger people today, growing up in a culture that doesn't really provide much in the way of moral foundations to go which way or another,
So his question is really about if you have any knowledge based in your experiences and knowing about your father and everything that might tell us about, I think, how to guide young people to make the decision to find the moral knowledge, the wisdom to do the right thing. Because he's saying so much attention is given to not how everyday people have to face this choice. The difficulties in World War II and what happened to Jewish people and Roma people was because many people allowed it to happen. They didn't do something like your father did. So he's asking what your perspective will teach you, might help us with young people understanding how to do the right thing.
What I think is the education. We need to know the history, first of all. For me, Japan, Europe, for you, Europe, America, Israel, we all have to keep the record of the history. Written documents we have to keep, we have to share. For example, my friends in Japan established Junior Sugihara Foundation. We keep only the truth, only the record remaining written. Not that I heard from somebody or I saw in TV, I read in a book. It's not enough. We have to keep the right record. It's for next generation, 50 years, 100, 200 years. It's our task to keep the history correctly. This is what I'm trying now.
So it's not only to keep the history, your adherence, I mean, we would think any child would be happy to hear some of the mythology about how great your father was, but you're saying the facts are enough. In fact, they're better than the mythology. And you're saying, let's stick with the truth and make sure that it's known and documented. And when we know these stories, which is to your point, that there are not enough of these stories told. Your point was, we're hearing all about the extremists, but what about the people who were caught and didn't do something? How do we talk about those who did do something? And how do we share that story? I think that's what I'm hearing you say. And you're saying, essentially, that these stories should be preserved correctly and remembered and shared. So I think that may be the answer. But no, go ahead, what?
I understand that the message, but my question maybe more is what, in your perspective, creates a true Ichigo Sugihara versus just an average Lithuanian who not only stood by but partook in the savagery that took place so shortly after?
What made your father do this? What made him stand up? What made your father not be like everybody else?
No. Why he was different, you mean? He's very stubborn. He doesn't listen to everybody. He has his own idea. He goes ahead with his idea, right or wrong. And fortunately, it was right.
There was someone, yes, right, the woman here, yes, hello.
My name is Sylvia Smoller, and the visa that my parents received was number 459. But I want to say just 3 quick things. One, thank you for getting rid of the fake news. Secondly, I want to just comment on a question about how people got destination visas to other countries and was there collusion among the diplomats. There were many Jewish agencies which helped, and the United States, which was in the case of my parents and many others, probably the Mir Yeshiva as well, Roosevelt had a list of people, the State Department had a list of people who would get visas to the United States, and I imagine other countries did too. So there were other entities that were involved in destinations, I think. But the third quick thing is in terms of how do you teach young people to have some kind of a moral bearing and a moral center. There was a time when we had a contest for high school children called the Sugihara Do the Right Thing Contest. And the Board of Education helped with that, and the idea was that they should write essays on small decisions in their own lives that with Sugihara as a model, that's how they heard the Sugihara story, but they used that to write essays in their own lives, how they made a moral decision. Now I'm happy to say that contest now under Matt Chanoff is being held in Africa, of all places. So it's a way to spread the idea that you do have some moral choices that you can make yourself. They're little ones, but they grow up to be big ones.
That's beautiful. Thank you. So I know that we're running out of time. There's someone who really, really would like to ask a question up there. And I think we're going to, can we do 2 more people? Do we have time for 2 more? Can we do that? Yes? Okay. So
I'd like to hand the microphone to Nathan Goodwood's daughter, who's here, who was one of the, my father-in-law, Benjamin Fishoff, was one of the many that learned about Mr. Sugihara and having a chance to escape. And Mr. Nathan Goodwood spread the word. This is his daughter.
Okay, so hello.
Hi.
My name is Chani Schmerling, and I'm Nathan Goodwit's daughter. And I grew up with the name Sugihara since I was small. We always heard about it, and we are very, very grateful to him. My father was a very close friend to Consul Jan, he wasn't a consul, but to Jan van Zwartendijk. And my father, after he got the Curaçao visa from, the Curaçao mentioned that you don't need a visa to land in Curaçao, my father went and spread it to all the yeshivas with Mr. Rahaftik. They let everybody know, and many, many people, the whole Mir Yeshiva was saved and came then to your father with these visas.
And there is also a person here that was raising pretty desperately, so we're gonna probably finish out over here. Is there a microphone? Yeah. Yes, sir.
My name is Adam Friedman. I'm here with my mother, Joyce, and her siblings, who are children of Shaps Jaskolka, who was visa number 805, became Saul Jaskol in the United States. These are some of my relatives. And we're just very thankful for what your father did for us. I'm a teacher, and every year I teach about 80 new students about your father every year on Holocaust Remembrance Day.
80 new students every year he teaches about your father.
And I'm always amazed how when I mention his name, they have no idea who he is, but by the end, they're always asking more and more questions. And my cousin Chaim and I started a website that we're trying to network with all people, survivors who have actual visas. So if you have an actual visa, we're trying to create a database of all the visas to be able to be in touch with each other. It's sugiharavisas.org. And
sugiharavisas.org. You know, you might be the way to figure out how large the number is of people who have been able to be alive because
we would love to do that.
If you are connected. Say the website address again.
Sugiharavisas.org.
Okay, sugiharavisas.org.
And a cool anecdote is, I heard the Chanowitz Cole family share their story. I became friends with one of the descendants of the person who received a visa, and we were friends for a number of years. And this event was actually the first time we realized that not only are we friends, but we have a connection that goes back through your father.
Wow.
So thank you.
So I'm very sorry that we're now out of time. In fact, I know we went over how long we were supposed to be doing this. So I think there's no better way to end it but to simply say what a lucky man Chiune Sugihara was, to have a son in you, to honor his memory, and to be with all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we'll walk you this way.